It began on a cold autumn morning at a quiet high school in rural Virginia, where the hallways smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and the buzz of lockers echoed between classes. The students were used to the same rhythm every day, but on this day, one girl drew more attention than usual. Her name was Emily Carter, a reserved 16-year-old junior who never seemed to fit into the loud cliques of her peers. She carried a plain black backpack that looked heavier than what most students lugged around. To the teachers, she was the quiet one who often stared out the window instead of taking notes, her eyes filled with a depth that didn't belong to someone her age. Rumors spread about her family life. Some whispered that her father had been in the military, some said he never came back, and others simply assumed she was odd because she rarely spoke. Emily's silence was not born of shyness, but of something heavier, something forged in the shadow of sacrifice. That morning, as she sat in the cafeteria corner eating an apple, two boys began teasing her. They were part of the kind of crowd that thrived on mocking others for amusement. "What's in the bag, Carter? You carrying bricks in there?" one sneered. Emily ignored them, as she usually did, but today they pushed further. One of them grabbed the strap of her backpack and yanked it off her shoulder before she could resist. The cafeteria erupted in laughter as the boys plopped the bag on a table and unzipped it, expecting to find nothing but books or maybe something to ridicule. What spilled out first were notebooks covered in doodles of military planes and handwritten letters sealed in old envelopes. Then, clattering onto the table with a dull metallic thud, came a medal. The room fell silent. The medal gleamed under the fluorescent lights, catching everyone's eye, but not because it was just any medal. It was a Medal of Honor, the highest and rarest military decoration in the United States, awarded only for acts of unbelievable courage. The boys froze, their laughter dying instantly, because every history class had drilled into them that the Medal of Honor wasn't something you just found in a teenager's backpack. It was supposed to belong in museums, glass cases, or with heroes long buried. Teachers rushed over, confusion spreading as wide as the silence. One teacher picked it up carefully, almost reverently, like touching something sacred. "Emily, where did you get this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she spoke with a strength that silenced the whole cafeteria. "It was my father's." The cafeteria, once filled with the noise of trays and chatter, was now heavy with the weight of her words. The principal was called. The school resource officer was called. Even local veterans who volunteered with the school were brought in to verify what they were looking at. And sure enough, the medal was authentic. Etched into the back was the name of Captain Daniel Carter, a U.S. Army Special Forces officer who had died years earlier in Afghanistan under circumstances so classified that even most newspapers had never carried the story. What Emily revealed next stunned them all. Her father had not just been a soldier, he had been part of an operation that was never supposed to be spoken about. When his unit was ambushed during a mission deep in enemy territory, Captain Carter had single-handedly held off waves of insurgents while his men were evacuated. He refused to retreat, fighting until he was fatally wounded. Survivors later said he saved every one of them at the cost of his own life. For years, his story had been buried in reports marked, "Top Secret." His family was given only fragments of the truth, told that he had died a hero but not the full scope of his sacrifice. Quietly, the government had awarded him the Medal of Honor posthumously, but it had never been made public, because the mission itself was classified. Emily had grown up with that medal hidden in a wooden box under her mother's bed. She knew the truth of her father when most of the world did not. She carried it with her, not to boast, but because it was the only way she felt close to him. That morning, when the boys unzipped her backpack, they had uncovered not just a medal, but a story that was never meant to surface in a high school cafeteria. The principal, shaken, called for an assembly later that week. Emily stood before the entire school, her backpack at her feet, the Medal of Honor displayed on a small stand beside her. Her voice was steady as she spoke about her father. She told them of his jokes at the dinner table, the way he taught her to ride a bike, how he used to say, "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified." And then she told them how he had lived that very sentence. Students who once mocked her now sat with tears in their eyes. Teachers who once thought she was just distracted realized she carried a grief larger than her age. Word spread quickly beyond the school. Local news stations arrived, then national ones. Veterans groups came forward, confirming the whispers of a mission gone wrong and a captain who had refused to let his men die. The Pentagon was forced to release a statement, acknowledging what they had long kept in the shadows. Captain Daniel Carter's story was finally told to the country he had given everything for. For Emily, it was not about fame or recognition. It was about finally being able to share the weight she had carried alone. The same classmates who once laughed now stood by her side. The two boys who had emptied her backpack approached her days later, ashamed. "We're sorry," one of them muttered, unable to meet her eyes. Emily didn't smile, but she nodded, accepting. She had learned from her father that forgiveness was also a form of courage. Months later, a ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery. Emily and her mother stood before rows of white headstones as a general presented them with an official citation and a folded flag. The Medal of Honor was placed in a case, to be preserved for history, but Emily still carried her father's words in her heart. She no longer needed to carry the medal in her backpack, because now the world finally knew his story. And so, what began as a cruel prank in a high school cafeteria became the moment a hidden hero's sacrifice was revealed to the world. The students who witnessed it would never forget the day laughter turned to silence, the day they froze at the sight of a medal that wasn't supposed to exist, and the day they learned that sometimes the quietest person among them carries the loudest legacy of all.